I'm Farah Duro, and you're listening to the PCOS Revolution podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the PCOS Revolution podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me named Stephanie Suazo, and she's here today to share her story. She was diagnosed with PCOS over 8 years ago, and she's experienced the symptoms for far longer than that, actually. And she actually found our program through this podcast. She was a podcast listener, and she actually lives in the South Florida area. So she came to my clinic one day with all her test results and labs, and we discussed what kind of treatment would be good for her. And we actually had just started our 90-day reset program. So Stephanie has gone through our program, and she has some very exciting announcements today. She just announced to our Facebook group that she had a positive pregnancy test. So I want you to hear her story, because I think that not only is it inspiring, but you're going to learn so much about her journey that might be resonating with you right now. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for being on this show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually really excited because, like you said, I've been listening to your podcast for a little while now, maybe about a year or so. And so I was thrilled to learn that you were nearby, close to me, that your clinic was close to me. And so I jumped at the opportunity to start working with you. And then obviously I joined the program, and that was just such a blessing to have all this information in one place, and it's been just so incredibly helpful. And yes, I recently confirmed a positive pregnancy.
Yay! Awesome.
I've already undergone my first ultrasound, and everything is looking great. So I'm just really excited to share my story, and like you said, hope that resonates with many women out there who have been struggling and are struggling with PCOS, and hopefully, bring you ladies some hope in your journey, whatever that journey looks like, and answer any questions.
Well, thank you. And this is National Infertility Awareness Week, actually. So we are, really happy to know that this is not a stigma. You don't have to be afraid to talk about your struggles. I really think it can help someone else also. And we know that PCOS is becoming increasingly more common, unfortunately, and also infertility as well. So most of you probably who are not struggling with fertility issues know somebody that is. And I think that, that's how far we've come. Actually, we'd be able to share our stories with each other. Stephanie, if you could tell me, what was your biggest obstacle about seeking treatment for PCOS? Like, what was the hardest thing?
Well, I think, so I knew from a very early age that something was just off, in general with my body and my cycles. And so when I first went to see an OBGYN, I was around 18 years old. And I mentioned this to the doctor, and I was never told, look, you have PCOS and this is what it is. And essentially I was only told that if you have irregular cycles and you're not trying to get pregnant, then you should go on hormonal birth control, and that'll solve the problem. And, I was 18. I didn't know any better. Especially at that age, you think doctor knows best. And so you follow that advice. And that's what I did. And I was on hormonal birth control, a little bit on and off, but mostly on for over 10 years. And so I think that the biggest struggle was first not knowing, because nobody took the time to diagnose it or explain it to me. And then masking it with hormonal birth control, because hormonal birth control essentially makes you think that you're having a period every month, when you're really not. And so you're not in tune with your body. You don't know what's going on with your body. And I think that's that was what was really difficult for me, was just not knowing, not having the information. I remember I once I ran out of my prescription for the pill. And so I made an appointment with my OBGYN and went in for my yearly checkup. And that's when they officially decided, like, that doctor took the initiative to diagnose me, because I had been going on, after going off birth control, I was going on almost 6 months without getting a period.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was obviously not normal. So the first thing they do is they do a pregnancy test just to make sure that you're not pregnant, which I knew I wasn't, but they do it just in case. And when they confirmed that I wasn't, then the doctor had me do blood work and an ultrasound, and in fact confirmed that my hormone levels were not where they should have been. And in the ultrasound, they could clearly see a lot of tiny follicles in my ovaries. So right there, they had confirmation of PCOS. And I think part of the reason why it hadn't been diagnosed earlier was because there just wasn't a lot of information about PCOS. And so maybe some doctors, or the doctors I saw earlier on, just didn't know or didn't know much about it. And then secondly, it seemed like conventional medical wisdom for, quote unquote, treating PCOS was just to do hormonal birth control. Mm-hmm. And so that's what that's what I kept hearing from doctors. And even when I was diagnosed, at this point I was 26, or I should say officially diagnosed, the doctor still insisted that I just go on hormonal birth control, because he said, if you're not trying to get pregnant, then that's the best solution. And I remember him saying that if and when I wanted to get pregnant, then I would absolutely need medication to do so. And so I already always just kind of thought that I was destined to do that whenever I decided to get pregnant, I was going to have to take, some sort of diabetic medication that I didn't know what it was. So that my biggest struggle was just, not having the proper guidance, proper medical guidance throughout these years, when I was so just focused on work, and I had been moving around from different cities, and just not having that consistent medical care, or having seen a doctor that would look at this more holistic picture and guide me through a more natural approach.
And your husband is a doctor, and he also came with you. I remember the first day that you came to the office, and all your labs were there, that the ones that we recommended, that we posted in the Facebook group one time, and looking at everything, just kind of getting the big overview. I just looked at you guys, and I said, I think that she's going to do this. I just know it, because you are determined. You're like, okay, what else do I need to do? And with that, I just know, like, when someone is open to the idea of, yes, things can change, and this is not, concrete diagnosis that you have to struggle with for the rest of your life, that's when we see the magic happening, really, and like from day one, you were just determined, like, okay, I'm going to start January 1st. I'm going to do this. And what do I need to do? So that was amazing. And so what sort of results did you notice when you started to incorporate some of the recommendations that we give in the 90-day? Like, what did you first notice?
Well, I will say that because I had started listening to your podcast, well before I went to see you and started the 90-day program, I had already started noticing some improvements in just my general overall well-being. So I noticed that I was just feeling more energetic. I was, I think, generally more energy and less headaches. I used to get a lot of headaches, so I noticed that I was getting fewer headaches, and I would say I think generally, especially once I did the Dutch test and some of and you looked at the blood work, and I started supplementing, I think that's when I really started noticing a huge reduction in my cycle length. So my cycles would sometimes go as long as almost 3 months, 70 plus days. And over time, as I was implementing these changes, these dietary and just general lifestyle changes, I noticed that they started getting shorter and shorter, but they were still, 40 plus day long.
Mm-hmm.
And I still wasn't always very sure about what was happening with my body. So it wasn't until I went full in on the program and did proper supplementation and learned proper BBT charting.
Right. You're super important.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yes.
So once I did that, I could really understand what was happening within my body throughout the cycle. And that's when I noticed that my cycles just started getting shorter. They still varied a little bit. So one cycle would be 28, a perfect, picture perfect 28-day long cycle. And then the next one would be 35 days. But they were still within that good 7-day window that I felt comfortable with.
Or it was months and months sometimes. It
was, well, the shortest I'd seen a cycle before that would be like 45 days, which I thought was great at the time. But even before that, they would go as long as, they would vary widely, but they would be, 50 plus days, and sometimes 70 plus days. So they were all over the place. And it wasn't until I started consistently implementing the program that I really noticed a change and just more consistency within my cycles, which was huge. And I should say, so my husband, he practices Western medicine, but he noticed how much I struggled. Because I did go to a fertility clinic when we first started trying to get pregnant, and I noticed that my cycles were not cooperating. So of course, I did what conventional medicine tells you, which is to, go to a fertility clinic and do medication. And that's what we did. And I struggled so much with that. And he saw how much I struggled with it. And this is not even IVF. I didn't even get to the point of IVF. This was just medication and timed intercourse. And I struggled so much with it that he was really on board with me looking for alternatives, especially because we kept hearing from the fertility specialist. They kept telling me that really I was a generally healthy person. My labs were generally within normal ranges for a normal average person. I was not overweight, so my weight was within a healthy range. So I guess you could call me what's referred to as a lean PCOSer. And I was a generally healthy person. I ate generally healthy, and I exercised, although not always very consistently and regularly, but I exercised. And I had an overall healthy lifestyle. So they just kept telling me, we just need to get you to ovulate. And it sounded so simple. It didn't feel very simple. And the medication they gave me was it was so disruptive. It gave me just these really bad mood swings and made me very emotional. And like I said, and just going to the clinic to get monitoring done, for those of you who are familiar with fertility clinics, it's not a fun process. You get a lot of blood drawn, and that can be really taxing. And you get a lot of ultrasounds done, and it gets to the point where you just don't want to do it anymore. So he saw how hard that had been on me, and he was very on board with looking for alternatives. And I was still open to the idea of going through fertility, to a fertility clinic for medicated fertility treatments, if ultimately that's what I needed. But I was totally on board with getting my body in a healthy, optimal state before I even tried doing that. And I'm so glad I did, because I didn't even need to go to a fertility clinic.
Yay. And you, how many years did you guys try to conceive before you saw me, actually? That's in January, I guess.
Almost, I would say a little over 2.5 years before we saw you. Yeah.
Yes. Because I know that you had a lot of blood work done, but we said, let's repeat it. And what we noticed with you is, and we teach this in the program, is that the levels that necessarily look normal to some providers are not actually within the normal limits for someone who is trying to conceive. And especially for PCOS, there are some areas you had that were very like borderline as far as glucose, thyroid, but and vitamin D levels. So they might have appeared normal to some, but actually they were not, and I think just being able to read your own lab report and interpret that and say, I need to do something about this, gives you the power back, actually. And it is very empowering, I think, so how did you feel about when we talked about your labs and said, wait a minute, there's some room for improvement here, right? And then we started to address it and work with that.
Yeah, I was shocked because, and not to throw my husband under the bus, but yeah, he he's not an OBGYN, or he doesn't specialize in women's health, but he would look at my labs and think, oh yeah, they're within the normal range. It really took someone with a different perspective, and I guess a different background and training, to look at my labs and say, well, yeah, you're healthy, but you're not optimally healthy for conceiving. You really, like, there are things where you are borderline, or in the case of my thyroid, where we really need to work with you, maybe not medicate you, but definitely supplement you so that you get to optimal levels. And that was something that nobody had ever told me before, not even my fertility specialist. And my labs hadn't changed much since the reproductive endocrinologist had seen them. So it was totally eye-opening for me, and I would say that I think that was, again, I was generally following the things that I knew I needed to follow, but just those tweaks that I never would have known to do until I did the program. Just those minor tweaks, I think, made all the difference in the world.
And definitely even tracking your cycle, we saw, okay, wait a minute, the luteal phase, that's the second half of your cycle. When you do ovulate, the temperature should stay pretty high. And it wasn't quite as high as we were hoping. And we then did the Dutch test, and that's done in that second half of your cycle. With our program, we recommend blood work in the first half of your cycle, and then the second half in urine test. It's actually dried urine that's done at home that will show you a deeper picture of what's happening around implantation time. I think, tell me what you thought about that when you saw that 14-page Dutch report. I mean, it kind of blows you away. Like, I thought I knew everything about my hormones, but no, look at this.
Yeah, no, it's so comprehensive. It really just shows you so much of what's going on. And it's not only a snapshot. It's not like, you get a blood drawn in one moment and that's supposed to tell what your levels are. You perform the Dutch test and you pee on this stick, but you do it over several hours. And so several times over several hours. And so it paints this picture of what's going on with your hormones throughout a whole day cycle. So when I saw the report, I was initially overwhelmed. It was a lot of information.
Yeah.
But obviously you were so helpful in sort of breaking it down for me. And that was extremely helpful. And so in the case of my report, it showed that I think as we expected with PCOS, that my estrogen levels, even though everything was kind of within normal range, they were within the right parameters, but they were always within like the extremes. So my estrogen was within the very high levels of the high parameter, and the progesterone was towards the lower levels. And so it just took some minor tweaking to get them closer to, I didn't repeat the Dutch test personally after that because I got pregnant soon after. But I remember that after looking at the results from my Dutch test, you recommended I started applying a progesterone cream because, well, one of the things that could possibly be happening is that I wasn't producing quite enough progesterone to allow for implantation. That was a possibility. There's no way for me to know, but that was certainly a possibility. And so I started applying the progesterone cream the following cycle, and that's when I got pregnant.
Yay! Your body's like, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, it was just these minor things that that I never would have known to do had I not, seen the results from the Dutch test, for example.
Definitely. And we go through that in week 3 of it's a 12-week program, but we discussed that in week 3 because the first 2 weeks we're actually really concerned about goal setting and really, kind of honing in on the why that you really want to address the PCOS from the root. So because it's easier to give a pill and say, okay, here you go, and take this for 10 years. And when you're ready to get pregnant, go ahead and take another pill. That's, easier, but yet harder because the pill does not solve all the issues. We know that. It doesn't solve insulin resistance, and it doesn't help with, completely regulating your cycle when you get off of it and want to conceive. And it doesn't help sometimes, with other things going on. We've even had patients with acne that it's not helping with. So, it's really up to you at that point to say, okay, enough's enough, and I'm ready to make the changes. And I think when that happens, it's a whole shift, a whole mindset shift that goes into play, and that everything starts to become easier. Would you agree? Or
yeah, I mean, I think I struggled a little bit at first when I went off the pill because I found that the pill actually, I thought, was helpful to me because it helped with the symptoms that I would complain about, that come along with PCOS. So, I lost weight when I got on the birth control pill, and my unwanted facial hair went away. And then as soon as I went off the pill, all these things came back. And so my initial reaction was, why did I ever go off the pill? But of course, I wanted to get pregnant, and it just took some time for me to realize that the pill was not working with my body; it was working against it, and it was a matter of me finding other better ways to work with my body, to get my body doing what it's naturally meant to do. And like I said, I think it's just we don't realize how we go day to day and we think we're eating healthy and we think we may be doing the right exercise or enough exercise, and it takes a program like this, or in my case a lot of research until I found a program like this to really realize what it really takes for a body with PCOS to start functioning properly and optimally. And it wasn't just a matter of, well, I need to exercise. Well, how much do I need to exercise, and what type of exercise should I be doing, and what sort of dietary implementations do I do? Do I go keto or not? And I think a lot of people just don't have that sort of guidance, which is why I found this program to be so helpful.
Well, thank you. It means so much to me because I feel like I wish this is the program I wish I had, when I was struggling
3 or more years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it took a while to actually piece together everything that has been helpful for me and for my patients and for the last, decade or more. And I think that learning from the providers we work with as well, and everyone from psychologists to nutritionists to reproductive endocrinologists, and we have some wonderful resources actually in the portal from those experts as well. Like it's become so much easier to address it with our patients even, and just say, okay, here is something that I really feel that you would benefit from learning. Every woman with PCOS, no matter what the age, would really benefit from learning these things, and something you can apply for the rest of your life. I mean, it's not just because we want to get pregnant and we want to have a healthy pregnancy. It's what happens after pregnancy and what happens when you are going through menopause and all those things. We still need support. And so this is something that I feel like women of all ages really need. And so that's why I'm just so excited for you that this is actually like, it's become just, I don't know, like you put it together so quickly. Like, honestly, it's April. I'm like, wait, it's all, you barely made it past the 90-day mark. We're like, wait a minute. I was on spring break and I get this email from Stephanie going, guess what? I'm like, what? It's March.
Yeah, you were the first person I told.
Your husband's going to kill me. You're like, wait a minute. But I'm so excited because it's like just you sharing this with everybody has really, I think it's going to make a ripple effect into women who feel like their power has been taken away from them because of this PCOS diagnosis and feel like there is no hope. And I'll tell you that there is, and I know I'm living proof of it. My kids are living proof of it. Stephanie's living proof of it. And so many patients we have. So I think if you let's say your sister or your best friend is struggling with PCOS, what would you recommend? Would you recommend they take the same approach, or what advice would you give them?
Well, I would say, so in my case, it took a while. I mean, I got here eventually, but it took a while for me to get here because I just didn't have the information. And so for me, it was, going off birth control, seeing my body go through these changes, and then trying fertility treatments and failing at those. Mm-hmm. And then after all that is when I decided that I really wanted to find a more natural approach. And I really wanted to take the time to learn about my body. And I think that was crucial for me. And so I think the first thing I would recommend to anyone who's listening, especially if they're on hormonal birth control, I mean, even though while I was on hormonal birth control, I felt fine. Knowing what I know now and having gone through what I've been through, I recommend that you get off hormonal birth control if possible. Mm-hmm. If that's an option for you, I would definitely consider going off hormonal birth control and just learning about your body, taking the time to listen to your body and learn, listen to what it's telling you and learn to work with it. And then, after you've done that, I definitely recommend following a program like yours, where you can find all this information consolidated in one place, and just educate yourself, learn about all these things. I started, like I said, educating myself through other ways. I was listening to podcasts, including this podcast. I read a few books. I started with Woman Code, and that was a good starting point for me. And then from there, I kind of fell through that wormhole of just, fertility and PCOS information in general. But then when I found your program, the beauty of it was just having all this information consolidated into one place. And I've seen other programs out there, and I'm sure they're just as good. I haven't tried any other ones, but I felt like this one really resonated with me because it really integrated all the things that I had already learned through other means, and it just put them all together into one place. And I just thought that was really helpful. So I would print out all the materials every week, and I started my binder, and I would have to refer back to whenever I needed to brush up on something. And then for me, I also found that doing the weekly acupuncture sessions was really helpful. I think we all have stress in our lives, and I in particular had a lot of work-related stress. I still do. It's just part of life, but I felt like I learned to manage it through not only exercise. I started doing yoga more consistently, but the weekly acupuncture sessions have really been just key for me in managing stress. So I really urge women out there, if that's an option you have, if you have somewhere you can go to locally, I would definitely try to take advantage of that. Even if you can't do it on a weekly basis, if you can only do it even monthly, I would really recommend it. It's been life-changing for me. I've continued to go through acupuncture treatments even now in early pregnancy, and I plan on continuing them throughout my pregnancy because they've just been so helpful. So I would recommend if my sisters, and actually my sisters struggle with the same condition. So I've been urging them since I started to really take my advice and get off birth control if that's something they're still on, and then follow a program like this one, or at least start with your book, which I should also mention it's something that I started with. So I first listened to the podcast, then read the book, and then went in to see you and started the program. So I've gone through the whole gamut.
Yay. I think I tried it. I was like, oh, here's my book. You're like, oh, I read it already. Like, okay, right?
Yeah, I really wanted to find a natural way to heal my body, and that's what I did, and it worked wonderfully. So I don't regret 1 minute of it. It took time to get here, so if I can help women avoid having to spend all that time, I definitely want to encourage women to find you and find this program or any other program that you feel comfortable with, to find it as early as possible. But with that said, if you are on hormonal birth control, I personally started trying to get pregnant right away because that's what I thought, that's what I thought I needed to do, just get off the pill and start trying right away. But I'm actually glad that it took a while. Again, now looking back, I'm glad that it took a little while because I really gave myself time to heal from hormonal birth control and get to a place where, it's now healthy to support this pregnancy, which is also really important. So yeah, give yourselves that time to really get to know your body and to really learn about your body and to really get your body to a healthy state. And I think this program is a wonderful way to do that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing. I know that you have just inspired so many women out there that are perhaps scared to stop birth control, because I know it can be a scary step, and who are, have lost faith in their body because sometimes their bodies are not doing what they want them to do. And that can be so frustrating and heartbreaking. So I'm really proud of you for taking those steps and come such a long way in such a little time.
So. And I should say, for those women who are, a little afraid of coming off hormonal birth control because maybe they're not looking to get pregnant right away, I found, I've listened to another podcast that's called Fertility Fridays.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found that to be really helpful, not only if you're trying to prevent pregnancy, but also if you're trying to get pregnant. I incorporated a lot of the suggestions. So the podcast is run by a woman named Lisa. I'm sorry, I don't know her last name.
Yeah.
But you can find her at fertilityfridays.com, I think. And her podcast is focused on teaching women fertility awareness methods for either preventing pregnancy or trying to get pregnant, but naturally by essentially BBT charting with a little bit more involved. So it's also doing cervical mucus observations. And so if that's something that, if for women who are not trying to get pregnant, but don't want to be on hormonal birth control, or maybe, they don't want to use other barrier methods, I found that to be really helpful. And even for me trying to get pregnant, so alongside with the recommendations of the 90-day program, I was also following some of the recommendations that Lisa gives in her podcast for cervical mucus observations to identify my fertile window so that you can time intercourse more optimally for success for getting pregnant. So
definitely, it's so helpful.
I wanted to mention that too, because I found that to be a great resource as well.
That's a fabulous podcast too. I'm trying to actually interview her. So if you're listening, Fertility Friday.
Great. Yeah, and she put a book out as well. I haven't read it myself yet, but I've heard rave reviews about it. So I'll probably get that soon because, after I do have the baby, I don't want to go back to hormonal birth control. So I'll have to find other methods, and I'll probably go to her book first.
Yeah, definitely. And these things that you're learning now, you can implement even postpartum, or there's not usually a regression that we see once your body has established a really good pattern of insulin balance, and you've worked with your hormones and your thyroid is under control and all of that. So thank you so much, Stephanie. If you guys would like to check out the 90-day reset, we'd love to have you in the program, and just go to thepcosrevolution.com. And we are reopening our program as of this week. So I hope to see you guys all there. And thank you so much again for joining us today, everybody. And thank you, Stephanie. Have a great week.